Black Mesa, Arizona Territory, October 3rd, 1879. The wind cut like iron filings that morning, fine and metallic, scraping across the dry flats and through the broken fence lines I'd been meaning to fix for weeks. My hands were cracked from the cold, the kind of pain that makes a man feel alive only because it stings enough to prove he still bleeds. I'd been out since dawn, checking the south pasture, mending the split rails where the last storm had knocked them loose. The hammer in my hand moved without thought. Lift, strike, lift again, the rhythm of someone who's got nothing but the work to keep the world from collapsing inward. There wasn't anyone left to talk to, and I'd stopped praying the year my brother died. Prayer felt like talking into an empty canyon and waiting for the echo to come back as mockery. By the time the sun climbed over the ridge, the wind carried dust like a living thing, restless, searching, whispering over the bones of cattle long dead. I remember thinking it sounded like breathing, the kind that comes from a chest too tired to keep going. Then I heard something else. Not the wind, not the creak of wood or the sound of the horses. A rhythm hooves at first, then laughter, drunk laughter, the kind that comes after cruelty. I turned toward the trail. 3 riders broke through the dust, swaying in their saddles. Their shadows dragged behind them like old sins. I didn't move to meet them. Folks who came this way without warning were rarely bringing anything worth having. They didn't stop at the gate. They rode straight up to the yard, where the old hitching post stood, the one my brother had built from mesquite before he died. Without a word, the lead man swung a coil of rope off his saddle and tossed it around the post. Something thudded against the wood, heavy, human. That's when I saw her. A woman, tied tight to the post, wrists bound above her head, ankles crossed and lashed with rawhide. Her hair was long and dark, matted with dust and blood. The dress she wore had been torn half off her shoulder. She wasn't moving much, just breathing in, short, rough pulls. One of the men spat and grinned at me. "Payment," he said, "for that bay horse you wouldn't sell last spring." Len. He sounded proud of himself, like he'd just done me a kindness. I didn't answer. The wind had gone still, as if the whole land was holding its breath. The second man leaned in his saddle. "You can keep her or trade her. Army won't take her back." "Too much trouble," they said. They laughed again, all 3, the sound dull and ugly in the cold air. I watched them, counting the rifles, the way their hands rested near their belts. Drunks, but dangerous. Men who'd kill for amusement, then sleep well after. "What's her name?" I asked finally. The lead man shrugged. "Don't know. Don't care. She stole from the wrong wagon. Take her or leave her. Either way, we're through." I could smell their horses, sweat, leather, whiskey. They had the kind of stink that follows violence. My gut told me to walk inside, shut the door, let the wind and coyotes take whatever they'd left behind. That's what a smart man would do. Stay out of other people's sin. But I didn't move. The rope around her wrists creaked with every weak pull she made to breathe. Her face was turned down, a smear of blood tracing her jawline. She wasn't crying. That almost made it worse. Crying meant hope. She'd already run out of that. The lead man spat again, then yanked the rope one last time, making her body jolt forward. "There. Yours now," he said. "Ain't every day a man gets a woman for free." He turned his horse. The others followed, leaving a wake of dust and laughter that lingered longer than they did. When they were gone, I just stood there. The sound of the wind came back, soft at first, then rising like it wanted to erase what had just happened. I didn't move for a full minute, maybe more. The world felt heavier, the way it does before a storm. I told myself she wasn't my responsibility, that she'd die quicker if I got involved, that the Army patrol from Fort Haven would come by in a day or two and handle it. But I knew that was a lie, the kind of lie a man tells when he's afraid of the part of himself that still gives a damn. The post creaked again. She made a sound, not a word, just a small noise that might have been pain or defiance. That was when the question came. Not from her, not from the wind, but from somewhere meaner and older than both. "What kind of man are you, Elias Ward? The one who turns away, or the one who cuts the rope?" I walked toward her before I had time to answer. If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away. And if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming. The night she arrived, I didn't sleep. I sat in the chair beside the cot, hat off, elbows on my knees, watching the faint rise and fall of her chest. The oil lamp threw soft light across her face, bruised, dirt-streaked, half-shadowed. The wind pressed against the cabin walls like an old animal sniffing for warmth. Every so often, a coyote yipped far off. Out here, even the silence had a pulse. She didn't stir until near dawn. When her breathing caught, I thought she might wake, but her body was still too heavy with exhaustion. She murmured something I couldn't catch a word that didn't sound like English, and then went quiet again. Whatever dream she was trapped in, I hoped it was kinder than the world outside my door. By morning, the light found its way through the cracks in the shutters. Dust swirled in the golden beams. She was still alive. That was something. I checked the cut on her thigh, clotted but dirty, and the swelling on her wrists. Rope burns had dried to dark red lines. I cleaned them as best I could with water from the basin and salve that smelled like pine and smoke. She didn't wake through it, though her breath hitched when the cloth touched raw skin. I poured coffee, drank half, and sat back. The air was cold enough to make the boards creak. Outside, the land looked like it had been cut from bone-white dust, thorn scrub, sky too bright to look at. Nothing soft, nothing forgiving. That was the country that made me, and it had made me mean. But watching her breathe, I felt something I hadn't in years, a pull that wasn't pity, just recognition, the kind of quiet knowing shared by two creatures who'd both been hurt and didn't expect to be helped again. Toward midday, her eyelids twitched. She blinked at the light, squinting like she wasn't sure what world she'd woken into. When she tried to sit, her legs trembled. I moved toward her slowly, not wanting to spook her. She noticed anyway. "Easy," I said. "You're safe." She looked at me like a cornered animal, half ready to strike, half ready to vanish. I handed her a tin cup of water. Her hands shook too much to hold it, so I steadied it near her lips. She drank, small sips, most of it spilling down her chin. Her voice, when it came, was rough. "Where?" "This. My place," I said. "Broken Mesa, a day's ride from the canyon." Her eyes darted toward the window, then back to me. "You kill them?" "Not yet." She didn't speak again, just leaned back, breathing hard. Her body was still fighting itself, trying to decide if it wanted to keep living. By evening, she slept again. I stepped outside to clear my head. The wind had picked up, carrying dust from the ridge. The sun hung low, bleeding orange into the horizon. I walked to the post where they'd left her, the rope still coiled at its base. I picked it up, rough fibers, stiff with dried blood. I should have burned it, but instead I found myself staring at it, fingers tight around the knot. That rope had been a choice, a line between what I'd promised myself I'd never do again, get involved, and what I'd done anyway. When I went back inside, the lamp had gone out. I relit it and found her eyes open, following the flame. She didn't flinch when I sat down, just watched. I poured her another cup of water. "You got a name?" I asked. She hesitated. "Nayeli." It sounded soft but strong, a word made for wind and mountains, not cabins and fences. I nodded. "You're safe here for now, Nayeli. You can rest." She swallowed. "You trade me?" "No," I said. "You're not for trade." "Oh, quote." Her gaze flicked over the room walls, stove, the rifle near the door. "Men lie. I'm not them." That earned the faintest arch of her brow. She didn't believe me yet, and I didn't blame her. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The lamp hummed, wind pushed against the boards, and her breathing steadied. I caught myself looking at her hands, small, calloused, the kind that had known work and ropes long before those bastards tied her up. I wondered what her life had been before this, whether someone was missing her, or if the world had already decided she was gone. The next morning, she tried to stand and nearly fell. I caught her by the arm before she hit the floor. Her skin was hot, pulse racing. "You're not ready yet," I said. Her voice came in fragments. "I not stay long." "Then you'll be short," I answered. "You need rest." That seemed to confuse her, my tone, maybe. It wasn't command, just fact. She didn't argue. She eased back onto the cot and let me wrap a clean cloth around her wrists. I worked quiet, careful. When the job was done, she whispered something under her breath, soft, rhythmic, maybe a prayer. It didn't sound like a plea. It sounded like memory. I left her to rest and went outside to check the animals. The sun was already high, the kind of heat that dried sweat before it could fall. My remaining mare was restless, nostrils flaring. Horses feel what men pretend not to. I gave her water, ran my hand down her neck, and scanned the horizon. Nothing moved. But that didn't mean peace. Around here, stillness often came before the storm. When I came back, Nayeli was sitting up, bare feet touching the floor. Her hair fell over her shoulders, black as crow feathers, tangled but alive. She looked at me, chin lifted. "You fix me," she said. "Then I go." "Where?" She shrugged slightly. "Anywhere not cage." That word cage hung in the air like smoke. I'd built mine with silence and fences, but it wasn't much different from hers. "I won't stop you," I said. "But you can't walk yet. You'll bleed." Her lips pressed together. "Better bleed than stay." I didn't argue. The stubbornness in her voice sounded familiar. It was the same thing that had kept me alive after Salt Creek, when every reason I had to stay breathing was buried in a shallow grave. For a while, she sat in silence, looking at the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. "You live alone," she said. "Long time?" 12 years, I answered. "Why?" I hesitated. The truth was jagged. "Because the world takes too much when you let it close." She nodded slowly, like she understood more than I'd said. "You think close mean weak. Sometimes close mean heal." That word again. Heal. I wasn't sure what that meant anymore. But hearing her say it stirred something buried deep, a memory of what it felt like to be seen, even if just for a heartbeat. Later that day, I caught her by the door, trying to stand again. Her knees shook, but she stayed upright. "You're going to fall," I said. "Maybe," she answered, "but I fall my way." She took 2 steps, then 3, before the pain forced her to stop. I moved toward her, but she raised a hand. "No," she said. "I stand alone." And she did, trembling but proud. For the first time, I saw not a victim, but a force of her own, making wounded, yes, but not broken. As night fell, I cooked what little I had: beans, salt pork, stale bread. She ate slow, polite, like a guest who didn't plan to stay. When she was done, she looked across the table. "You think men come back?" "I don't know," I said, "but I'll be ready if they do." "You fight for me?" I thought about it, then answered truthfully. "I fight for what's right." She looked away. "Then maybe same thing." We sat there a long time, the oil lamp burning low. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was something else, uneasy peace, maybe. The kind that comes after a storm when you're not sure if another's on its way. Before lying down, she said one more thing. "When I strong, I go. You no stop." "I won't." She nodded once. "Then I sleep," and she did. I sat back in my chair, the rifle leaning against my leg, listening to the wind move through the cracks in the wall. The sound wasn't cruel anymore. It was almost kind, like it was trying to say, "You did right this time." Maybe I had, maybe not. But for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel completely alone. This expanded version keeps the grounded, masculine voice and adds depth, more inner conflict, physical description, and slow emotional thaw between Elias and Nayeli. The pacing matches the rhythm of a desert dawn. Quiet, tense, but warming. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from, so I don't feel so alone out here. The first 2 days after I brought her inside, the cabin was filled with sounds I wasn't used to, small ones. A rustle of blanket, a dry breath, the soft creak of the cot whenever she shifted in her sleep. I'd lived too long without another person's weight in the room. It made the air feel different, thicker, like it had to move around 2 bodies instead of 1. She slept most of the time, her fever breaking slow, her skin slick with sweat. I kept the lamp low and the window cracked for air. The desert nights carried chill, and the sound of coyotes filled the dark like a half-remembered song. Every few hours, I checked her pulse, poured water between her lips, and sat back, waiting. She was light as a ghost when I first carried her, but each breath since had pulled her a little more toward the living. I told myself I was only making sure she didn't die under my roof. That was the truth, or part of it. The third morning, she woke fully. The light cut through the cracks in the shutters, gold and dusty. Her eyes opened slow, unfocused at first, then sharp. She pushed herself up on one elbow, wincing when the skin at her wrists pulled against the raw cuts. The blanket slipped from her shoulder, and she caught it fast, pulling it back up. I poured water into a tin cup and held it out. "Here," I said. She hesitated, then reached with both hands. Her fingers trembled. Half the water spilled down her chin, but she drank. When she finished, she set the cup down without meeting my eyes. "Name?" she asked, voice barely there. "Elias," I said. "And you?" Her lips parted. "Nayeli." "Oh." The name hung in the air like smoke, soft, foreign, heavy with something that didn't belong to this cabin. I nodded. "You can rest, Nayeli. I won't ask questions." Her gaze flicked toward the door, then back to me. "You kill men who bring me?" "Not yet," I said. "But I might have, if I'd had reason." She watched me for a long moment, studying the lines on my face, the scar at my temple. People out here learn to read truth from silence. Whatever she saw, it made her stop asking. The days blurred. She started sitting up for longer, eating bread soaked in broth. The color came back to her face, but the way she watched me never softened, like she was measuring how much of me was danger and how much was help. I'd seen that look before in soldiers after battle, in horses after gunfire. It wasn't fear exactly, it was memory. The kind that never leaves. At night, I'd sit by the window while she slept, keeping the lamp low. The wind outside whistled through the cracks in the boards, and sometimes I caught myself listening for footsteps that weren't there. Habit, maybe. Or guilt. Both sound the same in a man's head. On the fourth night, a storm moved across the flats. The rain came thin and slanted, tapping the roof like fingers. She stirred, half awake. "Storm talk," she murmured. "What's it saying?" I asked. "That it pass soon." She smiled faintly, eyes half closed. "Wind always talk first." You hear it better than I do," I said. She didn't answer, already drifting back to sleep. By morning, the air smelled clean again. The storm had left puddles that reflected the sky in broken patches. Nayeli stepped outside for the first time since she'd come. She walked barefoot, slow, testing her legs. The earth was cool beneath her feet. She stopped by the fence, her hair damp from the rain, her face turned toward the mesa. "Too quiet," she said. "Quiet's how I like it." "Oh." "Quiet make ghosts loud," she said softly. Then she looked at me. "You have ghosts?" I thought about lying. Instead, I said, "One. My brother." She nodded, not prying, not pitying. "Ghosts not leave till you forgive them." "You think I can?" She looked out at the horizon. "If you want peace, you learn." That word peace felt foreign in my mouth. I hadn't thought of it in years. The desert doesn't offer peace. It offers distance, and men pretend that's the same thing. Later that day, she found an old comb in the trunk near the stove. She sat by the doorway, untangling her hair in slow, deliberate motions. Every few strokes, she winced, but kept going. Watching her do something so ordinary felt stranger than the storm had, like watching a wounded hawk preen its feathers after surviving the fall. "Why you live alone?" she asked without looking up. "I tried living otherwise," I said. "Didn't work out." She hummed, not pressing further. "Alone make heart hard. Hard's what keeps it beating." She smiled faintly. "Not always." The silence stretched after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that settles between people who've both been hurt enough to stop pretending. That night, she helped me light the fire. Her hands were steadier now, her wrists wrapped in clean cloth. I caught her glancing at my arm where the old scars ran, jagged white against the tan. "Trail wounds," I explained. "From raids, fights, bad luck." "Still here," she said. "So not bad luck." We ate in silence. When she finished, She set her tin plate aside, then asked, "You think I go soon?" "When you're strong enough," I said. "You have people?" She hesitated. "Maybe, if they live. If they come looking, they kill you first," she interrupted, her tone flat, factual. "They think you take me for use or trade." I nodded. "Then I'll let you speak first." That seemed to surprise her. "You not afraid?" "I've been afraid of worse." She looked at me a long time, then said quietly, "You speak like man who ready to die." I didn't answer. The truth was simpler. I wasn't ready to die, but I'd made peace with the idea that living didn't always mean much more. The next morning, I woke before dawn. She was already up, sitting by the window. The light hadn't yet broken over the ridge, but the horizon was starting to glow. "You don't sleep much," I said. "Sleep is when they came last time," she said. "I not like dreams." I poured coffee into 2 tin cups, handed one to her. She held it awkwardly but steady. "Bitter," she said, grimacing slightly. "You get used to it," I replied. "Everything bitter out here." She laughed quiet, short. "You talk like priest with no God." "Maybe I lost mine," I said. She sipped again. "Then find new one. Maybe wind. Maybe fire." I didn't know whether she was joking or not, but something in her eyes said she believed it. Out here, nature was the only thing that kept its word. The sun climbed higher, painting the world in gold and dust. We spent the day outside, working near the fence. She moved slower than me but refused to rest. Every step she took was an argument against the past. Around midday, she found a half-dead sage plant near the corral. She crouched beside it, pressing her fingers into the dry soil. "Still alive," she murmured, "root deep." "You talk to plants too?" I teased. "They listen better than men." She smiled when she said it, small but real. For a second, I forgot she was someone the world had tried to break. She was just a woman kneeling in the sunlight, coaxing life out of dust. That night, after dinner, she asked for a story. "You know stories?" she said. "Cowboys always know." "I'm no cowboy," I said. "Still," she insisted, "tell one. You." So I told her about the time my brother and I scouted for a cattle outfit near Salt Creek. How a flash flood came without warning and took half the herd. How we climbed a mesquite tree and watched the world turn to river around us. She listened with her chin resting on her knees, eyes wide. When I finished, she said softly, "You save each other." "I thought so," I said, "till the last time." The air grew still again, the fire crackling low. She reached out, touched the cuff of my sleeve, barely a gesture. "He forgive you," she said. "How would you know?" "Because you still live," she said simply. Later, when she lay down, I stayed awake. The stars above the roof beams looked close enough to touch. I thought about what she'd said: forgiveness, ghosts, roots. Maybe she was right. Maybe the land wasn't just something to survive. Maybe it was a place to start over, if you could learn to let it hold you. I glanced toward her cot. She was asleep, breathing slow, steady. Her face looked different without the strain, stronger, freer. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. "Hey there, friend. Take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. Your body will thank you." This version keeps the original atmosphere, but deepens the emotional pulse. Elias and Nayeli's guarded connection begins to thaw through silence, shared labor, and fragile trust, while danger still waits beyond the horizon. By the 5th morning, the world had gone still in that uneasy way that always comes before trouble. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The land out here had moods, it whispered, it waited, and sometimes, when something bad was on its way, it went quiet enough for a man to hear his own heart knocking against his ribs. I was mending the corral fence when I saw the dust. A thin, low curl moving against the Sunday, not a storm, not cattle, too straight, too deliberate, riders. I leaned on the post and watched. The dust trail held 3 shapes, small at first, then sharpening as they drew closer. 3 men. I didn't need to count twice. The air changed, that prickling sense that something you thought you'd buried was walking back toward you. Inside, Nayeli was grinding dried corn in a wooden bowl. The steady scrape stopped when she caught sight of my face through the open door. "Men?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. "Stay inside." She stood anyway, that same quiet defiance she'd carried since the day I cut her loose. If same men, I not hide. You'll stay out of their sight until I know for sure. I reached for the rifle hanging by the door. The metal was cool, familiar, like shaking hands with an old sin. The riders came slow, unhurried, not the speed of drunks or hunters. This was the pace of men who thought the land already belonged to them. When the wind shifted, it brought the smell before the sound: sweat, tobacco, cheap whiskey, and the faint tang of gun oil. I'd known that mix too long to mistake it. They stopped at the fence, 3 horses blowing dust through their nostrils. The man in front wore that same cavalry coat, buttons missing, insignia torn. His smile was the same, too lazy and mean. "Morning, Carrick," he said, using the name folks once called me on the trail. "Heard you been keeping something that ain't yours." "Oh, for." I didn't correct the name or the lie. "You already got what you came for," I said. "That horse was payment enough. See, that's the thing." He spat in the dirt. "We changed the price." The scarred one leaned forward in his saddle. "Word in town says you took in an Apache girl. Army wants her kind returned. They pay for that now. Better than horseflesh." The third man laughed. His teeth were stained and broken. "Guess we sold too cheap last time." That. They wanted to trade in human misery, twice the same old sickness of the frontier. I raised the rifle halfway, just enough to draw a line in the dust between us. "You'll turn around now." The one in the coat chuckled. "You ain't gonna shoot 3 men over one squaw, Carrick." Behind me, I heard the door creak. Nayeli stepped out before I could stop her. Her hair caught the wind, whipping across her face. She wore my old shirt, her wrists still bandaged, but her stance straight. Her eyes, dark and steady, met theirs without blinking. "You not touch me again," she said. Her English was rough, but her meaning was clear as a bullet. The laughter died in their throats. The man in the coat's grin turned hard. "She talks now. Guess you been teaching her things." He spat again. "Move aside. We'll take what's ours and leave you your pride." The wind rose behind him, rolling the dust like a curtain. I felt the air shift the same way it does right before lightning hits. "Last chance," I said. He smirked. "Yours." He drew first. The gun flashed in the sun, a wild shot. Clumsy, but close. The post beside me splintered. I fired once, steady. The bullet hit him center chest, knocking him back off his horse. He hit the ground hard and didn't move. The other 2 scattered, one firing from his saddle. A round grazed my arm, a hot burn that stung like shame. I dropped behind the fence, chambered another round, and waited for the dust to settle. Then I heard another shot, sharp and sure, not mine. Nayeli stood in the doorway. The spare Winchester braced against her shoulder. The recoil barely shook her. The man with the scar jerked sideways in his saddle, clutching his shoulder before tumbling into the dirt. The third rider wheeled his horse and bolted, dust trailing behind him toward the ridge. I stayed crouched a moment longer, listening for more. Nothing but the wind and the faint rattle of the dying. When I stood, the smell of gunpowder and iron filled the air. 2 bodies lay in the yard. The wounded one groaned, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. The other was still, eyes open to the sky that didn't care. Nayeli stepped down from the porch, gun still in hand. Her breathing was steady, her face unreadable. "You ever fired a gun before?" I asked. She nodded once. "My father teach me, before soldiers come." The wounded man coughed, spitting blood. "You'll hang for this," he rasped. "Both of you." "Maybe," I said. Then he stopped breathing. We stood there a while, neither of us speaking. The dust began to settle, landing on their bodies like a shroud. The wind blew harder now, pushing the smell of death east toward the canyon. Nayeli's voice was quiet. "More come," she said. "Not a question, a promise." "I know," I said. "But not today." I reloaded, my hands steady. "We'll bury them before dark. Coyotes will take what's left if we don't." "Love." She watched me roll one body onto a tarp. "You not afraid?" "Fear's a choice," I said. "I ran out of it a long time ago." She tilted her head. "You fight like man who already die once." Maybe I did. I tied the tarp shut and started to drag. Maybe that's the only kind worth fighting. We buried them behind the corral. where the ground was soft. No markers, no prayers, just dirt and silence. The shovel blades bit into the earth with dull thuds, like the land was swallowing secrets it didn't want. When we were done, Nayeli knelt by the well, washing the gunpowder from her hands. The water turned gray and ran off into the dust. Her reflection trembled in the ripples, part shadow, part flame. "You saved me," she said finally. "But I fight too." I nodded. "You did more than fight. You proved I wasn't wrong to cut that rope." Ugh. She looked up, her hair clinging to her cheeks in the heat. "You think wind forgive us?" I leaned on the shovel. "Wind forgets. People don't." Her gaze softened, not gentle, just knowing. "My people remember everything. That's why they survive," I said. That night, the wind rose again, carrying the smell of rain that would never fall. We sat outside by a small fire, the sky wide and silver with stars. The land looked like it had exhaled after holding its breath too long. Nayeli sat across from me, silent, turning the Winchester in her hands like a relic. "You think men come back?" she asked. "Not them," I said. "But news travels faster than horses. Someone always comes." She nodded, eyes on the fire. "Then we ready." I studied her face in the flicker of the flames. The bruises were fading, but something stronger had taken their place. She wasn't the same woman who'd stood tied to a post days ago. She'd burned that version of herself away. "You ever think about what comes after all this?" I asked. Her eyes met mine. "After?" She thought for a moment. "After is wind, always moving." I smiled, a dry, tired thing. "Maybe I'll learn to move with it." She set the rifle down, looked toward the dark horizon. "You live alone long time. You forget how to walk beside someone." "I remember enough," I said. "Just don't know if I deserve to." She didn't argue. She just pulled the blanket around her shoulders and said, "Deserve is word for towns. Out here, we earn or we die." We sat until the fire burned low. Coyotes cried again, somewhere beyond the ridge, not mourning this time, just calling to each other through the night. I thought about how sound carried out here, how even after death, echoes could linger for miles. The wind shifted once more, gentle now, brushing dust from her hair. She closed her eyes, breathing it in. For a heartbeat, the world didn't feel cruel, just vast, alive, and uncaring enough to let us start over. If you're watching on TV, don't hesitate, grab your phone and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters. This expanded version builds on the original's tension and violence with slower pacing, sensory immersion, and emotional nuance. The gunfight becomes not just survival but transformation, marking the moment Ilias and Nayeli's trust becomes unspoken, real, and shared in silence. The land was quiet after the gunfire. Not peaceful, not yet just empty. The kind of silence that comes when the earth is still deciding whether to forgive what's been spilled on it. The smell of smoke clung to everything, iron and dust and the faint sweetness of mesquite. Coyotes howled from somewhere beyond the ridge, their voices carrying through the dusk like grief too stubborn to die. By morning, the graves we dug were no longer mounds but part of the ground again. The wind had done its work, smoothing everything back to what it had been. Out here, mercy always came disguised as erasure. The sun climbed slow and red, heavy as a burden. Nayeli stood near the corral, her hair unbound, eyes on the horizon. The bandages around her wrists were gone now, replaced by faint red lines that would fade in time. She wore the same shirt, rolled at the sleeves, and my spare boots that were still too big for her feet. Somehow, she looked stronger in them, like someone who'd learned the ground would hold her again if she let it. "You don't have to stay," I told her. The words came out dry, half choked by the morning chill. She didn't look back. "And you don't have to tell me." The wind shifted west, carrying the smell of rain that might or might not come. She tilted her head toward it, eyes half closed, letting it pass through her hair. "When wind change, I go," she said. I figured. She turned then, meeting my eyes. "You want that?" I thought about it honest. What I wanted had stopped mattering a long time ago. "I want you to go where you won't have to look over your shoulder." "Lad." Her lips pressed into something halfway between a smile and a challenge. "And you?" "I'll keep fixing fences," I said. "Man's got to keep busy." For a moment, She laughed, soft, real. The sound surprised both of us. It wasn't loud or bright, just human, and I realized I hadn't heard that kind of laughter in more than a decade. We spent the rest of that morning tending to the land, not talking much. The sky opened wide above us, that pale kind of blue that hurts the eyes. She helped me drag brush away from the fence, her hands steady now, her step sure. Every so often she'd pause, scanning the ridge like she was reading a language written in wind and dust. I caught her watching the horizon more than once, not afraid, but listening. People like her heard the world differently. The wind spoke to her in ways I couldn't hear, and she seemed to know when to trust it. Around midday, she stopped working and looked toward the canyon. "Smoke," she said. I followed her gaze, a thin line rising near the far cliffs. Not big enough for a firestorm, just the kind that marks a camp. "Your people?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. "Maybe. Or maybe ghosts." I didn't press. Some truths don't need to be chased. The sun dropped lower, and the color of the land changed reds into gold, gold into shadow. I patched the last section of fence while she gathered brush for the fire. The rhythm of her movements was quiet, deliberate. Every time she stooped or turned, it felt like the land itself was moving with her, slow and alive again, after so much death. When night came, we sat outside, same as always. The stars appeared one by one, shy at first, then filling the sky until it looked like the heavens had torn open to show their scars. The fire between us burned low, more glow than flame. It made her skin gleam like copper, and for a long time, neither of us said a word. "If you've made it this far, I know you're a true fan of WWL. The wind carried her hair across her face. She didn't move to push it away. "You still think wind forget?" she asked quietly. "I do," I said, "but sometimes it remembers enough to bring things back." She watched the fire, eyes reflecting the light. "My father say wind is spirit of road. It move, so we move. Stay too long, it die." I nodded. "Then maybe it's not ready to die yet." She looked at me, a steady, unflinching gaze. "You think I stay because I need?" "No," I said. "You stay because you want." That answer hung between us, not a promise, not a confession, just truth. And truth, I'd learned, was rarer than gold out here. We stayed by the fire until it burned down to coals. The night had that hollow sound again, the one that makes a man aware of his heartbeat. A coyote barked somewhere near the creek, and Nayeli's eyes followed the sound. "You hear them?" she asked. "Yeah?" "They not cry," she said. "They call each other. Say, 'I live.'" Maybe that was what we were doing, too. When dawn came again, the sky was red along the mesa, bleeding into gold. The wind had shifted softer now, carrying the scent of rain from the north. Nayeli stood at the edge of the porch, the light crawling up her face. The land stretched wide, endless, uncaring, but it no longer felt empty. "Elias," she said softly, the first time she'd said my name without pain. "Yeah? You live long before wind change." "I'll try," I said. She smiled, not for me, not for the world, just for herself. Then she walked a few paces into the open, where the wind caught her shirt and lifted it like a flag. For a moment, she looked like something carved from the desert itself, proud, unbroken, too wild for walls. I thought she might keep walking until she disappeared into that bright horizon, but she turned, eyes on me, and nodded once, small, certain. Then she came back and sat beside me on the porch, silent, watching the light rise. The day unfolded slow. We mended what the fight had broken, a cracked board here, a fallen pot there. She found my brother's old knife, where it had fallen near the corral, and handed it to me without a word. The handle fit in my palm the same as it always had, but somehow it felt lighter. At noon, clouds gathered over the mesa, long streaks of gray that promised rain. The smell of it filled the air before the first drop fell. Nayeli stood with her face lifted toward the sky, arms loose at her sides, letting the water find her skin. "It's been a long time," I said. "For what?" "For rain that didn't feel like sorrow." She smiled,